Welcome back to People Person, the show where we talk about the real work of HR, but of course, make sure we have a little fun too, child. I'm your host, Kate Noel, SVP, Head of People Operations here at Morning Brew Inc. And today we're talking about humor in the workplace. Not forced fun or corniness, but real strategic humor. The kind that builds trust, accelerates connection, and maybe even keeps you sane during performance review season. Lord knows we need it. Joining me is Ashley Bendell and Peter Phelan, the co-founders of Funny People, a comedy experience for HR pros like us to laugh at the realities of our world. And we're not only joined by them here today, they'll also be part of our next HR Brew event here in New York City on April 21st. So please see the show notes for more information. But for now, gentlemen, welcome to People Person.
Thank you so much
for having us.
If there's one thing you really want to be sure about as an HR pro, it's that your payroll is running smoothly. Couple that with everything else HR has to deal with, and you'd think juggling is part of our part-time job, child. Luckily, this summer, QuickBooks Payroll is evolving into a complete human capital management platform to help growing businesses manage their entire team lifecycle in one connected place, and manage payroll there too. Inside QuickBooks, businesses can hire and onboard employees directly, manage HR documents, policies, and workflows in one place, and see workforce data seamlessly reflected in payroll and financials. And by managing payroll alongside benefits and employee data, you can reduce complexity and administrative overhead, because HR deserves a shorter to-do list. Learn more at quickbooks.com/workforce. That's quickbooks.com/workforce. All right. So look, we'll jump right into the questions because I have a lot to ask and y'all are funny as hell. So we're going to have a hoot. Okay.
Perfect.
So look, you've built comedy specifically for HR professionals, which is a niche. Not everyone necessarily thinks let's make HR laugh. So what made you realize that HR needed its own humor space? So before either of you answer, play rock, paper, scissors, shoot, and we'll decide who goes first.
Okay.
All right. Here we go. Rock, paper, scissors. All right, you go first, friend. Go ahead, Ash.
I joined this industry 8 years ago from Wall Street, and the perception of HR wasn't great. People were not leaning into you and the conversation. And I like to joke around like the best of them, right? I grew up around the dinner table in Scotland, like you're Ireland, ribbon folk, and they quickly realised there needed to be more of that. And it was only, a year and a half ago that I met Peter in an event. I've been in New York for 20 years, and he's actually very well known around the HR circuit for his comedic talents, not necessarily myself. And we just bonded and came up with this concept, and that was just under 12 months ago.
That's insane. Yeah. Wow. And how about you, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, thanks to Ash, who's overly modest at times. I'm really delighted that we created this. You know, my history with HR is a little longer than Ash's. I, studied it in college back in Ireland, worked in-house for a couple of decades, and I've just been out on my own for the last 10 years doing consulting and HR headhunting. But at times, I was just glad I wasn't still in-house, because I think HR has just gotten harder and harder with every year, crisis after crisis. Mm-hmm. And, when I see conferences and all the content is about, AI is going to take our jobs and the pace of change is accelerating, I'm like, okay, there's a lot of great serious content out there. Maybe there's room, and we brainstormed, Ash and I, over coffees and beers and various outings for something different, where you're not necessarily have to learn this information that if you don't get it today, you'll be fired next week. Yeah. It's just have fun, let loose, see the funny side, build community with no pressure to, have jam in all the latest HR tools and tricks.
I love that. But I'm curious to know, why did the two of you think that laughter was the answer to the problem of HR having a bad rep, which we know we do, y'all. It happens. Or just crisis after crisis, tragedy after tragedy. Why did you think that laughter was the appropriate response, Peter, to your point?
Well, I had been a chief people officer, so I had kind of a front row seat to how humor can be very impactful. And in one role, I was a chief people officer of a company called MediaMath, and we had an amazing run of growth and success in the market. And I'd say humor was like a built-in feature to our culture. And we were like either number 1 or number 2 on Glassdoor for New York City, a big market, 3 years in a row. And I think there was something to it. I can talk about specific situations, but just having that kind of sense of humor be part of the fabric of the culture, I think it was a very special insulation against bad stuff.
I love that. And what's your thoughts on that as well? Like laughter being the solution.
We sit down with HR folks, running that part of their organization, and there's always challenges that we're talking about. But the opportunity was to humanize people, to humanize ourselves. A lot of us have a sense of humor, yet we have our industry and HR professionals often have bad PR. And that's one part of it. The other part is it's just an unbelievably good time. It brings out your authentic self, right? And if you do have that comedic bone, then lean into it. And from that, we've built a community of folk, and it just keeps growing. And it's just wonderful to see them get on stage and within a safe space. And, we're still going strong. We've not had it, to your point earlier, we've not had a bad night yet. And we're only as good as the people that get up on the stage and the HR professionals themselves who don't take themselves too seriously. So it's multifaceted. That regard, yeah.
For sure. And Peter, I have to apologize. I'm nosy as all heck. So you mentioned that there were some instances that you would probably even be comfortable sharing of how like comedy or humor was a part of like the workplace culture and it being awarded 3 years in a row for that reason. Like, I'd love to hear a case study of that possibly.
For sure. So, I think that we did lots of things well. I don't know if humor was the biggest, but it was a culture where there was just like a healthy sense of fun and kind of whimsy. Like on the Wikipedia page or on the internal wiki, there was this thing called clothes of business, where if by some happenstance people showed up with very similar outfits, and it's like a casual work environment, you could wear anything, but sometimes people would come in walking, oh my God, it's the same stripy shirt, the same pants, the same jacket, and they'd take a photo, and that would get posted to the wiki, and that'd be an email would go around, amazing clothes of business today. And then there was other things as well where there was like almost like, weird as it may sound, policy enforcement through humor. So if somebody did something, that wasn't cool, they would get internally good-natured ribbing for doing so. Like this one woman decided, I don't know quite sure why, and that we were like eBay for a day or something, and she decided to do an email to the entire office to sell a pair of shoes that she didn't want anymore. Okay. The subject line was like shoe, and there was a picture of the shoes. It was the strangest thing. But the reaction from our culture, unprompted, was to kind of take this ridiculous thing and respond to it in a ridiculous way. And all of a sudden there was like reply alls with, the woman who lived in a shoe, a cartoon of that. There was like Dorothy's shoes from The Wizard of Oz. People were making bids on wanting one shoe but not the other. And then she was, I guess, probably a little bit embarrassed, but it was all very good natured. There was no mean-spiritedness to it, which was key in any humor, in any setting. And then everyone just like had the best time, there, and it made you closer. You're like you see somebody with the close of business photo. This stranger is now somebody who is beside your buddy, and in the picture, and it's like they're just like a little bit closer to you now. So having a sort of a sense of humor built into the culture just decreases tension, decreases barriers, and I think we get the same effect at Funny People, where, sympathetic crowd, we're all HR, maybe we haven't arrived in cultures where we can be fully funny during the day, but at night, at Funny People, go nuts.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I think that's so cool. And actually, I have an off-the-dome question, so I'm just hearing how, because funny is subjective, you know what I mean? And funny oftentimes get people in our office as HR because it's done wrong. So as an HR person, what's an advice you would give on like, how do you toe that line of making sure the humor is well received? It's not like off color. You mentioned empathy, which I think is totally like important. Like in your experience, how do you make sure you're gut checking yourself as a person who's been in the HR space that the joke is good? And that it's still funny, because ain't nothing worse than someone being corny.
So we don't pretend to be comedians. Well, I certainly don't. And the people getting up on the stage, 95% of the time, are not trained comedians. Peter's done it a lot. around the comedy circuit himself on stage. It's more of a safe space for people with a sense of humor to get up on stage and share their crazy stories from their workday. The funniest people are actually the ones that come into it fairly unprepared and just have something to share, are usually very nervous beforehand the first time they do it. But they flow through it. A lot of people in HR are within talent development. They're speaking, they're presenting every day. So it's a lot better than you would think. And look, the schmucks like me who will write some material, I open the show and we'll test out some stuff. And people won't laugh. People might laugh. I'll use my props, which you'll get to see a few of at the HR Brew conference or at our nights. So yeah, it's really about having a sense of humor, being authentic and not taking yourself too seriously with other people that you feel safe around. Yeah. If we get a friend of Peter's or mine who's done comedy or has a type 5, we've had employment lawyers that have done comedy courses get up and do a type 5. We've had HR professionals that have done a course like I did for 10 weeks or you did for 10 weeks when we turned 30 and have something pretty entertaining that rolls off the tongue already. But most of the time, it's people just sharing their stories. There's no bar to coming along. It's typically an audience member to start with, and then, half the time, the back half is full of people that never intended to do it in the first place when they arrived. And now we've got repeat customers, people coming back and doing it again because they enjoyed that experience.
Yeah, and it's not as hard as you think to be funny and not offend anybody. We've had, like Ash is saying, 14, 15 events now. And I think I only did a little cringe once out of like 75, I don't know, there's more than that. There's well over like 150 performers or performances now. And that wasn't even bad. It was just somebody having a bit of fun with one of us. Kind of mocking the host, roast the host. But there's a lot of things you can talk about that are your experience, your story. They actually, a lot of the stuff actually happened. So it's not like a question of, is it in poor taste or whatever. This is the facts. People are strange, and this is a story from my workplace. And I think why most of it does work is that people aren't being mean-spirited, and this is the same applies, to maybe injecting some humor during the workday when you're not at a funny people event. As long as it's, your authentic story, it's not mean-spirited, you're not making fun of anybody. Maybe you're making fun of yourself. It sounds scarier than it really is.
I love that. And I was actually thinking that's a good point too, where it's like the show is probably like a test run for a lot of like HR folks to feel like, okay, is the tone, is the delivery of how I'm sharing this on the stage about sharing the story, my experience, it could be used again, bringing that tool back into the workplace, Well,
I think if I can talk to that, there's so much potential with this environment. We're starting to see HR heads, SVPs of HR like yourself, bring their teams along for a fun night. We do have people talking about how it does help with their performance, but I think we're only scratching the surface around how to leverage different components of the evening, both, at the event itself, but also in-house at Morning Brew or wherever you may work, or something in between where we collaborate. Who knows? But it definitely, when you stand, you know what it's like probably, when you stand in front of an audience with a flash, a spotlight in your face and a microphone, once you get through that, the world's your oyster. And I think your confidence goes through the roof.
Well, yeah, I mean, I believe I'm Beyonce of HR. So honestly, a lot of that just feels very natural to myself. Yeah. But no, truly and honestly, I think you're absolutely right. And even if we think about HR in general, we tend to be behind the scenes, right? Yeah. Where we're dealing with like all the blackout projects that we're working on. Sometimes that could be publicly shared or not. Yeah. But in instances like this, to your point, where you do have the spotlight, you have the microphone, you can, practice and flex that muscle of speaking in public and et cetera, I think goes a long way. Even in my own experience, I really think that the moments in which I felt more comfortable bringing my full self, like my authentic self into my work, has allowed me to have higher sense of like relationship equity is what I call it, where it's like sometimes the work you do as an HR person is beyond the textbook, beyond the policies. It's like the trust you've built with someone, the connection you have with someone. And so they may be more willing to take on something you want to implement into the workplace because like you cracked a joke about it in a conversation. Absolutely. Things like that resonates with you a little bit.
Yeah. I think, those, in jokes, especially if they're like not too cliquey, they're broadly shared, like the, close of business thing, which was company wide or whatever. It just kind of builds these warm connections and levels of trust that then can be tapped into for the day job.
Yeah, please.
And I think, we also have the social channels. So on LinkedIn, it gives the leaders or the HR people the opportunity to engage, to present themselves similarly as they do on the night, as a funny person, as someone with a sense of humor, someone that doesn't take themselves too seriously. And we have a good conversation around it online as well and on the Instagram account. So there's various ways to take advantage of it, to your point.
Yeah,
and with the team.
And it can be shocking that HR is funny,
My God. It's like it blows the roof off the place. We're like, wait, you're a person and not a robot? Like, yes, I like AI, but I'm not AI. I'm still a huge part of resources.
Yeah. So the surprise factor is not insignificant. Some of the LinkedIn posts after Funny People really took off, like this labor lawyer who maybe people thought, he's a fun guy. He can be a fun guy, but to do a full set, sometimes the likes and the comments just like totally blow up. It's like seeing a whole new side of this person.
Yeah, and it's not, once again, it goes back to it's not about being funny, and being the next Chris Rock or Eddie Murphy or Jerry Seinfeld. It's about being your real self. People in the office will tell me that I'm not funny. My friends will be like, how are you doing this, Ash? You're not funny. It brings out another side of you. And look, I've got my job on the night as well to open. Mm-hmm. It's no coincidence that I open and the main guy, hosts the back half.
Too modest.
But it's all about making them, in my case, feel comfortable to get on the mic. And it's just cool.
Yeah, making people feel comfortable, inclusivity, it's team build, all the things that HR people like. You're just putting a spin on it that makes everyone laugh in the process or just feel like they can connect authentically. It's not like the weird icebreakers for the sake of what's your favorite color? Girl, it's fine. Like we can move past that. Let's get to the stuff that matters. And this seems to be a perfect way of doing that authentically time and time again.
Oh, yeah. And people get real with stuff up there. Talk about the authentic, not your favorite color. People have talked about grave illnesses. They've talked about religion and, interspersed with humor. One of our favorite attendees, who I won't name, was talking about the funny side of her hysterectomy, where she did a version of the Michelle Branch song, Goodbye to You, but it was Goodbye to Uterus.
I'm screaming.
And she sang it so well under the spotlight, and the crowd just were blown away.
I gotta get my hat to I do.
We don't want to share too much information, but we have people that also, they're struggling through work or they're struggling through whatever they're going through. They'll sing songs about it, like an extension of what you're saying, to famous songs. They'll rewrite the lyrics themselves, not with AI, not with ChatGPT, and it comes across really well. God, we could go on and on.
Yeah, but it's so authentic.
And it's very fulfilling because it fills our cup.
Yeah.
But people stick around after and, they want to be there, and it does help to de-stress, and it does help with the connection that we all really need. Like there's a really human part of it as well.
Yeah.
Like where we hit a nerve, I think.
I love that.
Which is good.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, I also wouldn't be doing my job if for the sake of the conversation, while we hear all the pros, there could possibly be disadvantages of that, though, of having humor in the workplace. In your experience, either of you, have you ever seen humor or comedy or human connection weaponized possibly in the workplace or in spaces that would deem to be a bit more professional as opposed to outside of that?
There was one misstep at
that Peter, tell me about it.
Amazing company I was talking about. On one occasion, the sort of reply all thing came across as actually very aggressive. And this one guy was relatively new to the culture, and he replied all, and he was using, he used the word liar, all in uppercase, talking about a specific individual, and he thought it was funny, but it wasn't. So I had a word with them, and, he apologized, and he got the hang of it very profusely to the person he targeted. And then he got the hang of it later. And next April Fool's Day, he did the most perfect prank. We had April Fool's Day was a big tradition at that company. He informed in a very serious-ish way, because Dennis Rodman's role was mentioned, which should have caused some alarm bells, but he was talking about us opening a data center in North Korea, in Pyongyang. And he was a technical guy, and the CEO actually believed it. And he was in an investor meeting at the time when he got the email that came through. He's like, oh, just opened a data center in Pyongyang. I think he had to go back and correct the investors later. It was a casual one, not a full-on board meeting, just a casual meet and greet. But so the same fella who maybe got a bit too aggressive once and learned his lesson, corrected it later and became a bit of a humor MVP.
Oh, wow. Wait, so what's the script? Oh, sorry, please.
Oh, no. It's your show.
Thank God. No, I was going to ask, what's the script for that, though, right? Like, if I'm an HR person across the seat from this gentleman who had liar in all caps, and we all know when you're reading something in all caps, it is loud, okay? Stand 10 toes down on that.
Yeah.
As an HR person, what's my script? How do I approach that, situation with an employee about, that wasn't funny, this is the best way to handle it, but also make them not feel, as long as they weren't offensive to anyone, but, not feel bad or terrible for trying to be a part of, the funny,
it's case by case. This particular fellow is a confident guy, good growth mindset. So I was able to just be very direct and say, this is kind of out of line with our usual reply all, because normally there's never any kind of mean-spiritedness or targeting an individual. But, the way you write that word, those uppercase and the exclamation points, that's definitely crossed the line. And he just accepted it very gracefully and graciously. It could have been different with a different person. But, I think direct is always good.
That's great. And it sounds like you hired the right kind of person who can take feedback. So they still followed the culture of learn quickly and adjust accordingly. So that's amazing.
And I think this is just from personal experience. The manager, right, sets the tone. And I think everyone is entitled and should feel comfortable to enjoy themselves and have a laugh. I will use myself as an example that sometimes I will try too hard to get a laugh and it won't land. The reality is it's not. They didn't hire you to be a comedian, right? I've got to remind myself that.
But if you're the personality hire, it's hard to not feel that, though,
Personality hire, is that what you said?
No.
Oh, no. I thought I'd never heard of that before, personality hire, because that's not what I would be hired for. I misheard you. I apologize. And the other thing is on the LinkedIn page, we do have to ask for people to say something a different way sometimes. Sometimes people will get a little bit excited, but most of the time it's fine.
Well, how do you mean by that, saying something different on LinkedIn?
No, I just mean commenting on an event or this or that. Just once it's in writing, I guess this is the point, whether it's at work, whether it's on email, it could be misconstrued. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's ever ill will necessarily around it, but to your point,
Yeah, with funny people, we got some cool rules where you're only recorded if you ask a friend to record you. Otherwise, what happens in funny people stays in funny people. And so there's no audio recording either. People can say the wrong thing or, drop a curse hither and yon, and it's all good. So truly a safe space.
I love that.
All the photos, we just post the photos and they're on the website, funnyhrpeople.com. But to your point, no, it's a very safe space. Maybe one day we'll have our Netflix special, Peter. You never know, but for now
we'll keep it low key.
On the low key. Exactly.
Just remember the little people. That's all I'm saying. So, Ash, how has performing comedy made you a better operator in your day job?
I don't think it has.
Oh my God!
Per your last point.
I do try my hardest to be my authentic self. I think it's very important, and I think that it's so. You're both have been on the HR side. I'm on, if you want to call it the vendor side. In order to differentiate yourself within sales, within account management, it's a human connection that ultimately wins the day. And, I try not to think about what the 10% believe with my accent, or they don't like my humor. If you're your authentic self and you've got a sense of humor, lean into it, because more often than not, people appreciate that. It'll help you to stand out. And like on the evenings themselves, you build a much quicker connection and just get down to business and talk shop. Well, not talk shop per se, but just talk about what you really want to talk about without beating around the bush.
I believe that. And please, people are taking the time to come out, right? So already people know there's intention about like being in the room and taking the time to connect with others. And HR people tend to always be the ones creating the space for people to connect, but it's not oftentimes that we are the ones being like the audience, right? So it's like you guys are creating rare air for a lot of people. So that's really, really awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of magical because just the lack of learning. I talk about, if you want thought leadership, go elsewhere. You might have some thought laggardship in our room, or certainly just a hoot, a safe space to have a laugh and just, let your shoulders drop an inch or two.
Yeah. My company can offer a lot to, the HR community, but I can't. So I stay within my lane and just try to make it a great night. To your point, I don't try and make it it's not meant to be educational. There's plenty of dinners and plenty of events and conferences. Yours is going to be the best of the year because it's Morning Brew and it's HR Brew and it's you. And it's going to be light and fun, and it's at the best location, one of the best locations in New York.
Please keep talking. Say more. How do you feel being a person who does humor, brings authenticity? How does that make you a better person as a professional day to day?
Well, when I was in-house, it became a little bit of a thing when I was at Bloomberg. I'm used to rooms with mics and cameras and lights. I was doing a lot of benefits stuff and rolling out new programs globally. And I tried to make it a bit more engaging by having jokes in this otherwise dry material benefits education sessions. And it kind of took off, and I ended up going on Bloomberg Radio with a feature on the weekends when the markets were closed and they needed some extra content to fill the time. And my persona was the finance ear, EAR, kind of like an agony uncle for people with personal finance problems. And it was usually in my lane of benefits, 401k and health plan stuff that I could talk about and didn't need to have various Wall Street licensure like Ash probably had back in the day.
I did.
There you go.
Multiple.
See? Yeah, lots of them.
Yeah.
So I think that definitely made me even just more approachable to the internal staff, that I was the funny guy on Bloomberg on the radio, on Bloomberg on the weekends. And even now, like there are other HR headhunters, other people out there who place. My day job is placing HR executives, and there's lots of them out there. I like to think I'm differentiated as a former chief people officer, but there's probably quite a few of those as well. But is there a former chief people officer who's now doing HR headhunting who's also funny? So that's making yourself a bit more memorable.
Yeah, and that's a tall order. Not many people can stack up to that, I must say. I'm just saying. And also, Ash, you said a little bit before that I just got brought back to my mind of like feeling like it's not educational, like it's not institutionally or like traditionally in that way. But I actually beg to differ. Like you can still learn from things like that, right? I think HR, we tend to think if it's not lunch and learn, if it's not, L&D,
that's
then
fair.
it's not
It doesn't have some credit attached to it.
You know what I'm saying? And if there's not like a metric to be measured by it, then there was no proof of success. But that completely disagree with that. I think that people can still walk away with life skills even from being a part of crowds that you guys are curating together. And if anything, if now that I know it's a thing and it happens in New York, I too will try to figure out how to have like team building stuff to have my team come in and feel comfortable to be in spaces like that.
Come down to Atlanta, we'll travel.
Don't tempt me with a good time. But okay, final question for you two before we close on out. If you could give one sentence to every HR person that's listening to the show right now about bringing more of themselves to work, what would that advice be?
Be your authentic self. That's it.
Okay.
Don't overthink it. And a sense of humor. Otherwise, it'd be a waste of time coming onto your podcast if I didn't mention that. With a sentence. That's all.
I love it. And Peter, how about you?
So I would say humor is a trust accelerator, so use it. And you're an HR professional, you've got good radar as to what not to say. Don't hesitate, take the risk, you'll be glad you did.
I agree. I think that's actually really good. Remember your gut. Your gut's brought you to this point of being an HR person. And so the same gut you use for others to make sure they are keeping in line, keep that gut for yourself. And like Peter said, more than like you'll be fine. And like Ash said, just be authentic. Don't be weird. This conversation is such a reminder that culture isn't just policy. It's energy, it's tone, it's how safe people feel being human. Ash Peter, thank you for reminding us that laughter might actually be one of the most strategic tools in leadership. We look forward to seeing and laughing with you again April 21st at our HR Brew event in New York City. And if you want to join us there, you can sign up at the link in the show notes. To everyone listening and watching, if you're building culture, maybe start by loosening your tie just a little bit. And if you have thoughts, stories, or confessions, please send it my way over at peopleperson@morningbrew.com. See you next time.